Renee Bobo Shanty wasn't born dangerous. The world made her that way, and by the time it realized what it had created, it was already too late to stop her. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Renee Bobo Shanty was born into a world that never gave her a chance. The streets of Detroit's East Side were rough, filled with abandoned houses, sirens in the distance, and people who had learned to survive by any means necessary. Her mother worked 2 jobs and still came home exhausted, while her father drifted in and out of prison. Renee's childhood was a cycle of hunger, noise, and broken promises. There were no bedtime stories, no safety, and no one to show her what right and wrong really meant. She grew up fast, too fast for her age, because in her neighborhood, innocence was a luxury that didn't last. By the age of 14, she had stopped caring about school. Teachers called her a problem, but in truth, she had stopped dreaming long ago. She spent her days wandering the streets with older kids who showed her how to make money selling stolen phones and fake sneakers. Her first taste of power came when she realized people listened when she spoke with confidence. That small discovery would define her future. She wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but she was fearless and clever. She knew how to talk her way out of trouble and how to read people before they even spoke. At 16, Renee was introduced to a low-level drug dealer named Tito, who ran a small crew on her block. He saw potential in her, a girl who could go unnoticed by cops and rival gangs. She started running errands for him, delivering small packages, collecting money, and watching deals go down. It was risky, but it made her feel alive. Each week she brought home more cash than her mother made in a month. For the first time in her life, she felt in control. Money meant power, and power meant freedom from the world that had always looked down on her. Within a year, she wasn't just running errands. She was running people. When Tito was arrested, his crew fell apart, but Renee didn't. She took what he left behind and turned it into something bigger. She built her own small empire, bringing in people who owed her favors, people who needed her protection. She became known for being calm even when chaos erupted. If someone crossed her, they disappeared quietly, and no one asked questions. Word spread fast. Bobo Shanty was not someone to mess with. Her street name came from her ability to bounce back no matter what happened. Police raids, betrayals, and shootouts couldn't stop her rise. Every setback became a lesson. Every loss made her stronger. By 20, she had expanded beyond Detroit, moving product through connections in Chicago and New York. She started dressing differently. Sharp suits, designer shoes, and gold chains. A symbol that she had escaped the life that once trapped her. Yet deep down, she never forgot the nights she went to bed hungry or the fear of seeing police lights outside her window. That fear became her motivation. Renee didn't rise because someone handed her power. She built it with her own hands, one risky deal at a time. People called her reckless, but in her mind, she was just surviving the only way she knew how. The girl who once had nothing had become the most talked about name in Detroit's underworld. And while others chased fame or fortune, Bobo Shanty chased something far more dangerous: control over her own destiny. By the time Renee Bobo Shanty turned 22, she was no longer just a local name, whispered in alleyways. She had become a figure of fear and fascination across multiple cities. Her network stretched far beyond Detroit. What started as small drug deals now involved weapons trafficking, counterfeit money operations, and secret partnerships with high-ranking criminals. Her influence grew quietly, without the loud violence most gangs relied on. She believed power worked best in silence, the kind that didn't need to be announced, only felt. People in her circle learned quickly that loyalty to Bobo wasn't optional, it was survival. Her reputation for precision became her most valuable asset. Every deal ran like clockwork, every shipment arrived untouched, and every rival that tried to challenge her either vanished or joined her side. She used fear not through chaos, but through control. Her methods were cold and methodical. She studied police patterns, memorized faces, and paid attention to every whisper on the street. No one ever saw her panic, not even when things went wrong. That calmness made her dangerous. In a world full of unpredictable criminals, she was predictable, but deadly in her predictability. She expanded her operation through a series of alliances. Instead of killing competitors, she offered them profit. She knew greed was stronger than hate. Within a year, her organization was funneling millions through fake businesses, nightclubs, car dealerships, and import companies that existed only on paper. Behind the glitz of legitimate enterprise, illegal cash moved like blood through her veins. To those outside, she was becoming untouchable. The FBI gave her a code name, the Queen of Shadows. After several major operations linked to her mysteriously collapsed before arrests could be made. Informants disappeared, evidence burned, and witnesses retracted statements. Somehow, Bobo always stayed one step ahead. But it wasn't luck keeping her free. It was paranoia disguised as discipline. She changed phone numbers every week, never stayed in the same house twice, and rotated vehicles so frequently that agents couldn't track her. She didn't use social media, didn't leave fingerprints, and never trusted digital money trails. Even her closest people only knew fragments of her empire. If one was caught, they couldn't destroy everything. To her, trust was a weakness that criminals couldn't afford. Despite her growing wealth, Bobo never lost her edge. She wore luxury but kept her instincts sharp. While others spent money on fame and parties, she spent it on information, corrupt officers, insiders in airports, even low-level clerks who could alter police records. She built a web of invisible protection around her, one that no bullet could break. She wasn't invincible, but she was clever enough to make others believe she was. The irony was that her empire's strength became its own weakness. The more people depended on her, the more enemies she made. Silent enemies who smiled to her face, but plotted behind closed doors. Every empire draws its vultures, and Bobo's was no different. Though she didn't realize it yet, cracks were already forming beneath the surface. The world she had built on loyalty and fear was solid on the outside, but hollow within. And somewhere among her trusted few, betrayal had already begun to take root. Success had made Bobo Shanty powerful, but it had also made her isolated. She had built an empire too large for one person to control, and paranoia slowly crept into her world like smoke through cracks in a wall. Every phone call made her suspicious. Every glance from her crew raised questions in her mind. Trust, once her weapon, had turned into her greatest fear, and in that growing darkness stood Marcel, the man she once believed would never betray her. Marcel had been with her from the early days in Detroit. He was loyal, smart, and always knew how to handle business without drawing attention. She had promoted him to second in command because he shared her vision: quiet control, no unnecessary violence, and loyalty above all. For years he managed her routes, her money, and her people. But power changes everyone, even those who claim to serve it. Marcel began to think the empire wouldn't fall apart without her. He wanted what she had: the respect, the fear, and the freedom that came with being the one everyone answered to. It began with whispers. Marcel questioning her decisions in private meetings, changing minor details in deals, and meeting unknown faces behind her back. Bobo's instincts told her something was wrong. She started testing him, feeding him false information about a shipment, and within days, that same information reached the police. That was all the proof she needed. Betrayal wasn't new to her, but this one cut deeper than anything before. Marcel wasn't just a partner. He was family in a world where family didn't exist. One night, Bobo invited Marcel to discuss their next move. He arrived confident, unaware that she already knew the truth. What happened after was never recorded in any police file. But by sunrise, Marcel was gone. Some said she buried him in the desert. Others believed he was dropped into the freezing waters of Lake Michigan. Bobo never confirmed it, but the message was clear: betrayal had a price, and it was paid in silence. After that night, something inside her changed. The once calm and calculated leader became distant and cold. She moved her base every few weeks, replaced most of her crew, and started burning old records. Even her trusted lieutenants weren't allowed to meet her without clearance. The woman who once thrived on control was now controlled by fear. She saw enemies in shadows and heard threats in whispers. Yet instead of collapsing, she grew even more ruthless. She decided that emotions made people weak, and weakness got people killed. The streets soon learned to fear her more than ever. Her name became a warning, a story mothers told their sons, who wanted to be gangsters. She had survived betrayal, but at the cost of her humanity. Every act of violence she ordered was another wall built around her heart. And while the world still called her the Queen of Shadows, Bobo Shanty was slowly becoming a shadow herself, untouchable, unreadable, and utterly alone. After Marcel's betrayal, Bobo Shanty realized America was no longer safe for her. Too many enemies knew her face, too many law enforcement agencies had her name in their files. The FBI, DEA, and even Interpol were now sharing intelligence. Piecing together the fragments of her criminal empire, she had outsmarted them for years, but every empire eventually draws too much light. When a shipment in New York was seized and one of her safe houses raided, she disappeared overnight. Rumors spread that she had been killed. Others said she fled to South America. But in reality, Bobo Shanty was on a private plane bound for London, under a forged passport and a new identity, Renee. London was different. Its streets were calmer, its people more cautious, and its underground networks less violent but far more sophisticated. It wasn't about brute strength here, it was about influence, money, and connections. Renee knew how to adapt. She rented a luxury flat in Kensington and presented herself as a wealthy art dealer, investing in European galleries. Her charm and quiet confidence made her an instant mystery in high society. While others saw a glamorous American businesswoman, those in the shadows soon recognized her for what she really was, a strategist who knew how to turn illegal profits into untouchable wealth. She started small, using her money to buy paintings from unknown artists, selling them abroad through shell companies, and reintroducing the funds as legitimate income. It was the perfect laundering scheme, and within months, she was working with people far more powerful than anyone in her past life. Politicians, brokers, and corporate men, all drawn to her boldness and secrecy. She never boasted, never spoke of her history, but her reputation followed her silently. Those who knew whispered that Renee Saint was none other than the American crime queen who vanished without a trace. Her London operation was unlike anything she had built before. No street gangs, no drugs, no visible violence, just influence, wrapped in luxury. But behind that facade was the same ruthless precision that had once ruled Detroit. Her men smuggled stolen art, counterfeit passports, and rare diamonds across Europe, using private planes and corrupt customs officials. The money flowed cleanly into her new empire. She had reinvented herself completely. The gangster turned socialite, the criminal turned collector. British tabloids began to call her the American Duchess of Crime, though they had no proof she was involved in anything illegal. But power, no matter how polished, always attracts attention. Her growing wealth began to irritate London's established criminal circles, especially those who had controlled the city's underworld for decades. They didn't like outsiders, especially not one who moved money better than they ever could. Still, Renee played the game carefully, attending charity events, buying luxury cars, and smiling for cameras, all while laundering millions behind the scenes. She believed she had escaped her past. What she didn't know was that danger in London wasn't loud or obvious like in Detroit. Here, it hid behind tailored suits and polite smiles, and it had already started watching her every move. Renee Saint's quiet success in London did not go unnoticed for long. As her art laundering empire grew, she began brushing shoulders with figures who ruled the city's criminal underbelly long before she arrived. Among them was Elliot Crane, a name whispered with both fear and respect. He controlled the docks, the black market trade, and several nightclubs that served as fronts for his operations. Unlike Bobo, Elliot was loud, impulsive, and violent, the kind of man who demanded attention through chaos. To him, Renee's silent rise was an insult. She had taken profits that he believed belonged to him, and her foreign origins made her an easy target in his eyes. At first, Elliot tried to play nice. He sent intermediaries with offers of partnership, which were nothing more than veiled threats. Renee ignored him. She had faced worse men back in America, and wasn't about to bend now. That decision set off a chain of events that would unravel everything she had built. Within weeks, one of her London warehouses went up in flames, destroying millions in stolen art, and killing 3 of her most trusted men. The message was clear: Elliot Crane had declared war. But Bobo Shanty had never survived by fighting loud battles. Instead of retaliation through violence, she turned strategy. She quietly gathered information about Elliot, his connections, his weaknesses, and his financial records. Her people infiltrated his clubs as bartenders, his transport crew as drivers, and even his accountants as assistants. Within a few months, she had enough evidence to ruin him completely. She didn't need to pull a trigger. All she had to do was pass what she found to the right people. A few anonymous tips to the police, a forged document here, a leaked recording there, and Elliot Crane was suddenly facing charges for money laundering and tax fraud. When he was arrested, Renee watched the news from her penthouse window with quiet satisfaction. Her empire remained untouched, and her rival was gone. The city's criminal world now knew she wasn't someone to threaten. But victories in her life always came with consequences. Elliot had a younger brother, Miles Crane, who was far more dangerous than Elliot ever was. He wasn't loud or reckless. He was patient. While everyone celebrated Elliot's downfall, Miles disappeared underground. He studied Renee's operations, her habits, her people. Revenge wasn't his first move. Understanding her was. Weeks later, several of her shipments went missing, and 2 of her associates vanished without explanation. No one knew Miles was behind it. He was creating cracks in her foundation, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Renee didn't realize how close danger had come. She believed she had won another war, just like always. But this time, she was fighting a ghost she couldn't see. For the first time since arriving in London, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: vulnerability. In a city full of polished smiles and silent killers, someone had finally learned to play her game better than she did, and that realization marked the beginning of her slow, tragic downfall. The illusion of control began to fade for Renee Saint. As London's calm surface started to crack, she had lived her life planning for every possibility. But even she couldn't see the invisible web closing in around her. Miles Crane, still operating from the shadows, had planted people deep within her organization. Each week, more shipments disappeared, and trusted lieutenants became unreliable. Her art deals were suddenly flagged by banks, customs authorities started asking questions, and one of her shell companies was exposed in a financial leak. For the first time in years, Renee felt trapped within her own creation. Her instinct told her that someone was watching, not just her enemies, but the law itself. The British National Crime Agency had begun to quietly investigate her after finding suspicious links between her art galleries and offshore accounts. What they didn't know, however, was how far her network reached. She still had contacts in the police force, people she had paid handsomely to keep her informed. When she learned that a task force was building a case against her, she went underground once again. She left her Kensington flat, burned everything that could connect her to Renee Saint, and moved to a remote farmhouse in Kent. The nights there were long and quiet, the silence broken only by the sound of rain hitting the roof. She could feel the walls closing in. Her once loyal associates avoided her calls. Some had been arrested, others had vanished. The woman who once controlled cities now lived like a ghost, moving from one safe house to another, carrying nothing but a bag of cash, fake passports, and a small pistol. Her paranoia grew stronger each day. She trusted no one, not even the people she had known for years. When one of her last shipments of stolen jewelry went missing, she knew the police had found a way in. The courier responsible for the delivery never returned, and within days, British authorities raided one of her London properties. The media described it as a massive breakthrough in an international money laundering ring, but they didn't catch her. Renee escaped only hours before the raid, thanks to a last-minute warning from one of her informants. Still, the escape didn't feel like victory anymore. It felt like delay. The trap was closing, and she could sense it. From her hiding place, she began planning her escape from the UK. She reached out to an underground network that specialized in disappearing people. New identity, new country, new life. She had done it before and could do it again. But this time, everything felt uncertain. The people helping her seemed too eager, too confident. Every instinct in her body screamed that something was off. Yet she had no other choice. Her enemies wanted her dead, and the authorities wanted her captured. There was no safe place left in the world. The rain outside the farmhouse grew heavier as she stared out the window, cigarette smoke curling around her face. Her empire was gone, her power reduced to a single desperate plan. Renee Saint, once the untouchable queen of 2 continents, was now a fugitive, waiting for her next move. Unaware that every step she took was already being watched, and her final escape was nothing more than a carefully built trap waiting to snap shut. Renee Saint's world had shrunk to a handful of shadows and a growing sense of dread. The woman who once ruled criminal empires across 2 continents was now pacing inside an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of London, clutching a burner phone and a forged passport. Every hour felt borrowed. She barely slept, surviving on adrenaline and fear. Her mind replayed every face she had ever trusted, wondering which one of them had led the police closer. She thought of Miles Crane and the silent revenge she had never seen coming. Every message, every meeting felt like a setup now. Still, she had no choice but to trust someone one last time. That someone was Noah, a young smuggler she had met months earlier through one of her old contacts. He had a reputation for helping people disappear, criminals, whistleblowers, even spies. His calm manner and quiet confidence made him seem reliable. He told Renee he could get her out of the country on a private boat from the southern coast. It would sail under a false name, reaching Spain within 12 hours. From there, she could vanish into Europe under a new identity. It was exactly what she needed: clean, simple, fast. Or so she thought. For days, Noah kept in touch using coded messages. He told her to move only at night, to avoid cameras, to use rural roads. Everything he said sounded like the advice of someone who had done this many times before. But something about his certainty made her uneasy. He seemed too prepared, too confident in his timing. Yet her desperation drowned out her suspicion. She had no money left to buy another plan, and every safe house she had ever used was either compromised or under surveillance. Noah was her only option, her last hope. The night of the escape was cold and foggy. Renee wore a dark coat and carried a small duffel bag containing her last fortune, a mix of diamonds, gold bars, and a few bundles of cash. She followed Noah's instructions, arriving at an isolated dock near Portsmouth just before midnight. The sea was still, the lights from distant ships glowing faintly on the horizon. She waited in the shadows, expecting to see the boat that would carry her to freedom. Instead, she heard the low hum of engines approaching from behind. Blue lights flashed through the fog. Before she could react, police cars surrounded the dock. Armed officers shouted commands, their flashlights cutting through the mist. Renee turned and ran toward the pier, her breath sharp and uneven. The sound of boots pounding behind her. A single gunshot echoed through the night. Her body jerked forward, collapsing against the cold wooden planks. The diamonds dealed from her bag, scattering like broken stars across the wet dock. Noah stood at a distance, his expression blank as officers swarmed the scene. He had been working for the police all along, his job not just to lure her out, but to ensure she never escaped alive. As dawn broke over the quiet harbor, the woman once feared as the most dangerous female gangster in America lay still, her blood mixing with seawater. The empire she built ending with one final betrayal. By sunrise, the news had already spread across 2 continents. American crime queen killed in UK police raid, the headlines read. Photographs of the foggy dock appeared on every channel, the body under a black sheet, the diamonds scattered like glitter across the wet wood. To most of the world, it was just another criminal story, another rise and fall of someone who had played too close to the fire. But to those who had lived under her rule, it was the end of an era. Renee Bobo Shanty was gone, and with her death came silence. The kind of silence that lingers long after the gunfire fades. Authorities claimed it was the result of a long, complex investigation. They celebrated the operation as a major victory against international organized crime. Yet beneath the official reports and press statements, whispers began to spread. Some said she had been unarmed when she died. Others claimed she was shot not by police, but by someone paid to silence her before she could expose powerful names. Even in death, mystery clung to her like smoke. The truth, as always in her world, was buried deep beneath layers of lies. In Detroit, old friends and enemies alike reacted in disbelief. To them, she had always seemed untouchable, the girl who had clawed her way from broken streets to global power. Candlelight vigils appeared in hidden corners of her old neighborhood, not out of admiration for her crimes, but out of respect for the woman who had defied every rule written against her. She had been a monster to some, a hero to others, and a symbol of Etzel to many who had nothing. Bobo had never pretended to be good, but she had been real, and that made her unforgettable. Months after her death, investigators continued to dig through the ruins of her empire. They found coded ledgers, encrypted drives, and accounts holding millions that no one could access. Her offshore fortune vanished overnight, leading to theories that she had moved her assets before the final confrontation. Rumors surfaced of hidden vaults in Switzerland, diamonds buried in rural France, and paintings locked in private collections under fake names. Treasure hunters, journalists, and former associates all went searching for what she left behind. None ever found anything. It was as if she had erased her existence one last time. Years later, documentaries, books, and podcasts turned her life into legend. Each version of her story was different. The ruthless killer, the brilliant strategist, the woman betrayed by her own ambition, but the truth remained elusive. Every new detail only deepened the mystery. Even now, people still argue whether Renee Saint truly died that night, or if she staged her death to escape once more. Some claim to have seen her in Spain, others in Dubai. The legend refused to fade. In the end, what made her story endure wasn't her crimes or her death, but the unshakable idea she represented, that even those born with nothing could bend the world to their will, for better or worse. Bobo Shanty had built empires, destroyed rivals, and outwitted nations. Her fall was tragic, but her name became immortal, a ghost that still lingers wherever power, fear, and ambition meet.